There you go.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear us? Perfect. Appreciate everybody taking the time to be here. My name is Greg Tomczyk, CEO at Valor Cybersecurity. Extremely excited about this very important discussion. Before we get into the topic, just wanted everybody to know that this session is pre-qualified to support your continuing education requirements for several of the cybersecurity certifications. So if you're a member of AFCEA, you can scan your badge and get your CEs for this session. So without further ado, this session is going to be on the agentic experience. So a lot of us are hearing about artificial intelligence and AI, both inside and outside of the defense space. The people on this panel see AI in action on a daily basis, so we're looking forward to bringing some of those insights to you today. Navy, Marine, Coast Guard, all the different sectors, agencies are impacted by AI, and a lot of people still misunderstand how agents are being used throughout networks, and we're going to break that down for you today. The key thing to walk away from this session today is really how do we engineer trust in the agents that we deploy throughout our networks. We're going to go through that in depth here today. So once again, my name is Greg Tomczyk, CEO at Valor Cybersecurity. We have a great panel to be able to discuss this topic with today. So first and foremost, to my right, Mr. Oscar Mancia, Executive Vice President of Ignite Digital Services, based here in San Diego. Oscar leads strategy and digital transformation initiatives for Ignite, focusing on emerging technologies with defense mission outcomes. He serves on the board of directors of AFCEA San Diego and is a huge contributor to the innovation here in San Diego. So extremely excited to have Oscar here. To his right, we have Chris Capuno, Human Experience and Practice Lead at Triumph Federal. Chris leads human-centered design and UX strategy for Triumph Federal, applying that human experience principles to federal mission systems, which is extremely important in this discussion. And emerging AI-enabled workflows. We know agents are defined by the workflows that they perform. So Chris is going to bring a really exciting and insightful context to this discussion. Christian Shakovsky is the Senior Technical Program Manager at NavWar. So he's going to bring a very insightful technical product manager insight to human-centered technology for naval decision support. We know decision advantage is extremely important for the Navy currently, and he's going to bring that insight to us today. So the way I want to get started in this discussion is to toss the ball around to each member of the panel here to get their insights on what does agentic AI mean to them in their vertical of the world, and how they see it on a daily basis impacting whether it's their agency or the customers that they serve. And I'll toss it over to Oscar first to dive into his insights.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, and appreciate everyone being here. Let me know if you guys can hear me. This is better. All right, perfect. I think AI, I would be shocked if not every single panel in this conference this week has the word AI in it. It's something that's really creating an incredible outcome for our customers, for the Department of War, for the world in general. And we've gone from a position in the last 2 years where everyone's getting up to speed on generative AI, right? From my customer perspective, especially with the Navy, everyone's accustomed now to being able to use prompt engineering, whether ChatGPT, the OpenAI models, anything that's out there. In my view, agentic AI takes it a step further, and it actually creates systems that allows you to not only prompt it into the, as a chat, but also generate an outcome from it. As an example, right, a real world example that I like to use with my customers is if you go into ChatGPT, you can ask it to, hey, give me the best hotel rate in San Diego for AFCEA week, right? If you could take it a step further with agentic AI, you can also have it go and book the room, go and book your flight, grab your credit card information, and leverage all of that to generate the capability to move from the request to the decision making fairly quickly. And that's what we're seeing today in the world of the Navy and the world of the Marine Corps is how do we get the kill chain shortened? How do we decrease the time to execute, whether it's a contract, whether it's a purchase requisition, even in a tactical edge, at decision making. And I think the beauty of this panel, which I'm extremely excited about, is it all revolves around trust and the ability to be able to generate these models in a way that whoever's using it from an end user perspective knows that that outcome is trustworthy, and how can they go and validate that trust. So that's my 2 cents on agentic AI. But I'm very excited about this discussion today.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive deep into what that trust engineer looks like. Oscar, appreciate those insights. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Oscar. Hey, everybody. Again, my name is Chris Capuano. As Greg mentioned, I'm the Human Experience Practice Lead at TRIA Federal. Human experience covers things like user experience design, machine-computer teaming, and user research, among other disciplines. And so I'm excited to bring that lens to the discussion today. A lot of the work that I focus on is outside of the Navy. I used to work for Newark Newport, but I now work for TRIA that focuses most of its work on HHS, Health and Human Services, CMS, DHS, Department of Veteran Affairs. So I'm excited to bring a little bit of a different lens while also leveraging some of my Newark and Navy background. I'll say, I think to your question, agentic experience to me is taking the best parts of human cognition and teaming it with a machine, an agent, to make decision making faster, to make decision making better, and improve outcomes overall. I think that's kind of the exciting piece of agentic experience and AI in general, is especially in the Navy context where it's a very data heavy operational environment where a lot of our platforms are ingesting tons of sensor data. We have historical data, and right now the human is at the center of integrating all of that information and making a decision. And I think that is extremely taxing. And one of the promises of AI and agentic experience is that we're going to be able to leverage AI to supplement a human's thinking and improve decision making based on the information at hand and making it faster. So I think to me that is the exciting and the promise of agentic experience and AI in general in the context of the Navy, and looking forward to discussing further.
Thanks so much, Chris. Christian, over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So Christian Satkowski, Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. I'm actually our Fight from the Mock technical lead at NIWC PAC. And so what I do with my role is try to embed with the fleet. I actually just got back last night from Hawaii. I was out there for 3 weeks, embedded with PAC fleet, working through some of their exercises and problems, and trying to understand how can we apply new technology and ingest it into what they're doing. And so when I hear agentic experience, I know they're getting approached by company after company saying, we're going to bring the next AI for you here. A big piece that we have to do is really understand and educate our warfighters and the workforce on what are the strengths and weaknesses of these agentic agents that they're coming. The technology is changing so fast that if we just say, hey, just prompt whatever you want, these are very critical situations that they might be in. Some are, some situations it's stronger than others. But then also we're getting into the realm here where agentic AI can generate content faster than somebody can process. And so if we say, oh, don't worry, a human will always be in the loop reviewing the outputs before that order goes to the ships. Well, now if you can generate thousands of orders very quickly, the humans aren't going to have time to go through that. So what does that look like for teaming with these various agents to ensure the right information is going out there?
Thanks so much, Christian. I think one of the big questions a lot of people in the audience are probably asking is, how do we control the negative impacts of a machine making a decision? And I want to get everybody's insight on that. As Christian mentioned, if it's going out and getting its own resources and making decisions, and then we have to try to control the negative impact of those decisions after it's executed. How do we think about engineering it from the start to provide those guardrails in real time? And want to just offer that up to any one of you that want to comment on that first.
I think I can start. One of the main things I think with AI in general is explainability and building that transparency, the decision chain, being able to audit that is really important. With agentic experience, the ultimate hope of the technology is, as a user, I dictate an outcome. Oscar gave an example of a shopping experience or a hotel booking experience. I want to go and book a hotel. There could be other implications. Obviously, in the Navy context, you're not necessarily doing that, but the idea is that these technologies are going to be more outcome focused in terms of I'm trying to accomplish this thing, and the agent is acting autonomously to work through multiple workflows and get to a final result, whether that be booking a hotel, tracking an adversary, looking at oceanographic data to make decisions. There's a lot of use cases for it, and I think what we need to do as system designers is build in that explainability and that transparency so that as an agent is going through a particular process, the user is able to look at the decision tree and how it got to where it made a decision or offered information, and be able to kind of audit that decision path. So that transparency that we talked about at the top is super important.
Yeah, and I'll add on there that I think an interesting aspect is, with the transparency, it's where are you getting the data that your agents are referencing and pulling from, right? I view the agentic experience as really a force multiplier. The number of times it's saying, I'm trying to find information on system X or things like this to be able to plan my mission outcome. I could foresee agents going to pull that, but making sure that those are coming from the right sources, the authoritative sources. How are we protecting our data sources to make sure that they're not getting influenced negatively from adversaries or things like that are all going to be important areas that we engineer into our systems here.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is you have to design trust from the beginning when you're building your models and your frameworks and your architectures, right? It shouldn't be secondary. The model's only going to be as successful as the trust that it enables with the end user. If the end user doesn't trust it and you can architect that through visibility, then no one's going to open up those models. No one's going to leverage those systems. So, from my experience is, can you create elements into the systems and models that gives you the accountability, right? The audit trails. How did you get to from decision A to decision B? What were those steps? Can you pull those reports out? Can you look at those reports and understand them without having to be an engineer? And I think that's important, is if you design these models with the intent that they need to be trustworthy, then I think you'll have a very successful system in place.
Yeah, super insightful. We were talking about before the panel, we see a lot of language learning models just being wrapped up and then resold to somebody else. It's based on ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. And we don't see many privatized language learning models that can be specific to the information that the government needs and controlling the data sources that it's pulling from. So I wanted to get each of you to comment on, if you can, where you see that going in the different sectors or agencies, and do we need to create a privatized, almost GovCloud-like language learning model that can really control that now and into the future?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm not a big fan of single products or single offerings. I love the idea of being able to leverage all the technical capability that's out there in the world, right? As long as it's secure. I've been fortunate through my role in my company at Ignite with many product partners, many of them sitting, that are here at FCA today, to see how each of them leverages their capability to develop the outcomes that we're seeing a lot in the fleet today. But it's, first step is, can you even operate in aisle 5, right? That's number one priority. Aisle 6, if you want to be at the edge, right? A lot of these companies that we're seeing in the commercial sector, they have incredible capability, but they didn't design their models with the intent to support the government. And that is critical because you can have the best model out there, but if you can't run it on the government cloud, if you can't run it at the tactical edge in a container, then it brings no use to what we're trying to accomplish here from a Navy and Marine Corps and Coast Guard perspective.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've heard throughout the few panels that I've sat in on is the government's emphasis on understanding Navy problems before bringing a solution. And I think that's super important. And to your point, Greg, of a lot of companies are building wrappers around commercial tools and offering to sell to the Navy without having that intimate understanding of what is the problem that this specific AI tool is tied to. And I think that's really important in this conversation as we're continuing to build AI tools, especially agentic AI tools, is truly being intimate with what is the Navy's problem and how is it solving it, and how is it solving it for the user that's going to use it. I think from my perspective as a user experience designer, really having that intimate understanding of the end user and how it's going to impact, how your technology solution is going to impact them and what it's doing to make their life better is really important.
Yeah, and to build off what Chris said, one of the things I'm really interested in is we understand the Navy planning process, right? So how do we go through this process? How are some of these tools turning on its head? So if you out there have solutions on where you think you fit in and what unique aspect you're going to bring to help solve that, I'm very interested in talking to you because I'm trying to help map some of these different technologies to where they fit in. But that's going to be a critical piece, is like, what's the unique aspect of your agent? Are you getting a unique data source that you have that no one else has? Are you doing something interesting or unique to transform that data for your agents? Or are you just even got a series of tools that are complicated for a human to use, but when you've opened it up to an agent and now they can run your network analysis tools, I don't have to train our crypto folks on your tool. They can then work with these agents to use your valuable tool that might have a lot of complexity in there, and I can get the valuable result out of it, right? So I view a really strong point for this agentic type experiences. We can build complex tools, but make them accessible for our warfighters where they don't have to now get trained on 50 different tools. They can just start to work with them in a more interactive experience there.
Absolutely. One of the things we spoke about leading up to this is infrastructure, the constraints around the infrastructure we depend on to deploy agentic systems, and compute constraints around that infrastructure. So I want to dive into that a little bit on what we can expect as the constraints, whether it's the energy that is required to run these agents on a continuous basis, or if it's around the actual equipment that's required from the kind of signaling to the user back and forth. I wanted to get all of your thoughts on the infrastructure components.
Yeah, so I'll jump in there to start. Like I've done some experimentation with this, and this is where I think, again, it's important to understand the constraints of, if I've got the frontier model, full cloud, I go to ChatGPT, I type something in, I get an answer really quick, right? Over the holidays, I did a local deployment on my machine where it is just CPU. I have no GPU enhancement, and it'll run and I'll get an answer, but it takes like 5 minutes, right? So understanding I'm at the edge, I don't have server racks of GPUs, this is what it can be used for, and what I can expect as an experience is going to be critical in like how we roll this out and manage those expectations for our warfighters. Because if you bring it out and it's like, I type it in and I'll have to wait, some situations that's okay, others it's not. How do we get the right model for the right situation with the right power and everything? Because yeah, when you're on a ship, power is limited, right? You don't have everything to plug in for. We need to think about how we can deploy these and make them accessible as we go.
Yeah, I think we've been kind of implying a lot of operational context for applying AI, and I think especially where we're at right now with the technology and as an organization, as Secretary Hegseth has said, he wants to take on more acquisition risk to reduce operational risk. I think there's a lot of opportunity to leverage AI to automate business processes, acquisition processes, to make those bureaucratic things faster and more efficient so that we can reduce operational risk. And, I think ultimately at some point we will get to a point where making decisions about how to use some of these large language models, agentic experience on board ships and submarines is going to be part of the conversation. Obviously, the compute power and the trade-offs of how much heat it emits, and how much that possibly gives away more of a signature. Those are definitely trade-offs that need to be discussed. But I think focusing more on at this point in time, like how do we apply it to business processes and some of the bureaucratic things to free up warfighters and government employees to do more mission impact work.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is, these models have to be designed to be at the edge, right? In these classified areas, it's being able to operate with potential interference from, adversaries. So if we can design these models in a way that not only allows for the compute and more of the technical infrastructure, but also allows you to be protected from adversaries, I think, should be pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
Greg, can I throw one more thing in here? Just one go back on this is an interesting thing I've thought about is in these different environments where you might have limited compute, how do we set the right expectation for when the model starts to fail? So if I deploy somewhere and I try to have 30 people all prompting it at the same time, is that going to degrade performance? How do I, as a warfighter, how does my experience change now when the fires person who's interested in shooting missiles and things like that, fires is always the highest priority, right? Everyone likes to talk about fires. If they're getting prioritized, how does my stuff as the logistician work in there, and how am I going to be getting the answers I need when I'm deprioritized in these types of situations? And then how do I still get my job done with less resources, right? So it's how do we do the expectation management, build that into our systems so they can, I'll say degrade gracefully in those constraints that we might encounter.
For the companies in the audience, I want to speak a little bit about the convenience versus the competitive advantage that AI can create, but can also be a deficit in the process. If you're creating a proposal using AI and then AI is reviewing that proposal for you to get into the Navy, Army, any of the branches, I want us to talk a little bit about how authenticity comes back into play and how there could be a competitive advantage to using less AI throughout your proposal process. I think that's something we commonly see as companies are applying to work with the government. If you're using AI to produce a proposal and AI is reviewing it, what does that look like for the competitive playing field? I think the panel has some interesting insights on that point.
I think that point goes back to my original point about using AI as a teammate and the human-machine teaming concept, augmenting your thinking and your creativity versus replacing it. And I think AI is not necessarily a purely creative thing. Obviously, it takes the best parts of human creativity and tries to synthesize it into a creative idea. But I still think that humans have that edge of and that strength of being creative. And if you can find ways to leverage AI to augment that creativity, especially in this context of proposal writing or business development, that's where you gain the competitive edge.
Yeah, and I would add it's also AI shouldn't replace the outcome, right? It should accelerate you to get to that outcome, especially in the proposal process. I mean, anyone that has written RFPs before, you got anywhere between 10 days to 30 days to submit a technical approach, cost volume, right? Compliance documentation. It's a significant amount of work, right? Where and with what areas should you be using AI? I'm a huge believer that if you're not using AI today in your daily job, you are falling behind the rest of the world. You should be using it in everything that you do. But it's back to Chris's point, is how do you use it? And it's, in my opinion, it should accelerate your outcome. It should not replace your outcome. in the terms of an RFP, it should not write the RFP for you for submission. It should accelerate you and get you to 70%, 75% of the output, and then you put in your secret sauce or whatever is it that you're trying to enable into that bid.
Yeah, I agree overall. It with AI as a force multiplier, it's one of those double-edged swords, right? Of by using it, you can generate proposals faster. But that means when an RFP goes out, now you go from 10 proposals that were written to 100 proposals, and there's still only one or two reviewers on those. So they are going to use. So sometimes you have to use the tools to get through those, automated wickets, get the right words in there. But then I would say, as you're moving through the process, relying on just AI generated content the entire process is where you're not going to get success. Understand you'll have to use it to get in the door a lot of the times, but then from there you can start to make it more authentic, show that you've put your thought into it. How are you making it unique to your company, your approach, that sort of thing? That's how I think you bring that authenticity in.
Yeah, there's a lot of doomsdayers out there when it comes to AI, and I know a lot of people, you think positive or negative when it comes to a topic like this because there's a lot of uncertainty. So I want to talk a little bit about how we put people at ease in the way that we can audit these systems to create the guardrails or the rules that are going to allow us to scale this for our organizational benefit and not kind of the negative, pessimistic side. As we engineer this is still really new. Obviously, it's been out for 20, 30 years, maybe even longer, but we're seeing it now more than ever as such a relevant topic. And I want to speak a little bit about the guardrails and the rules that we need in order to do it intentionally.
Well, I'll jump in at a starting point. I think really what we need to do is better educate our workforce, warfighters, et cetera, on what the capabilities are, how they can be used. And so understanding at its core what this capability is, what is it good at, what are its weaknesses. A lot of us don't have that experience right now. And so you can go ask, hey, ChatGPT, what are you good at? And what's your weaknesses, right? And it'll tell you some of it. But if you give a prompt, it tries to get you an answer, right? Whether that's the right answer or not, that can be up for debate. But understanding those different constraints is going to be critical to still letting the warfighter workforce understand when and where should I use this and when should I distrust this answer that it's giving me, right? When I was out on island, people were using agentic AI or really generative AI, not so much the agentic at the secret level yet, but it's giving them answers and they're like, hey, until I have something else that can show me differently, that's, model and sim, et cetera, in these areas, it's giving me something that looks believable, looks plausible, and helping me do it faster. But they were at least smart enough to question the answer because they'd been working in the space. Not all of our warfighters have that background and expertise. They just see the answer and say, go. So I think that's going to be a critical pivot that we'll have to bring into our workforce development.
Yeah, and I think we should do a much better job defining what is the outcome as well. What is exactly what we're trying to accomplish with our agents and define that in a way that is transparent to the end user. If the outcome is defined and engineered in a way that that is visible and auditable, then throughout the process, you should be able to assess if what the decisions that these agents are doing is accurate. Is it what you intended for them to be doing throughout the process? And with that visibility, then you should be able to cover a lot of the elements that you discussed, Greg.
Do you want to comment on that, Chris?
I think I agree with the training piece. I don't really know how many folks are well trained enough to understand how generative AI is coming to its conclusions. I think that's an opportunity for the Department of the Navy is building in training for artificial intelligence systems for the future warfighter to, as we're using these technologies and as it's helping them to make decisions, having them understand what's actually happening under the hood so that they can verify that outputs are actually accurate and not a hallucination, or if it's coming to a decision, what are the decision points that it made to get to that final output. I think education and training is definitely needed to support those types of decisions in the future.
And Greg, I'm going to throw one more thing in there. Like an interesting thing to think about, because I don't have the answer, is how do we expect our humans to interact with this audit trail, right? So, when you've used some of them, like Claude or any of those, it'll start to show you the audit trail of what it's thinking, what it's doing. You can expand and dig into any of that. If we're already saying, hey, there's too much going on, they don't have time to do all this, are they really going to be digging into every decision? Are there better ways to surface that information for a human to process rather than having to dig into every detailed audit trail for this? Those I think are challenges when we're talking the agentic experiences. How do we bring that up and expose it in a way for humans to process without having to expand all the drop downs, read it all, when we don't already have enough time to do that as is?
Yeah, we'd love to get some questions from the audience, but before we get there, I just want to have each person on the panel discuss kind of a case study that is going on in their world of how agentic AI is being used. A lot of you in the audience may not be seeing it actually being put into practice across your organizations or within the ecosystem that you live and work in. So just want each person to comment on a case study of how they see agentic AI actually being put in place into the work that they do.
When do you guys want to start this time?
I can start. One of the things that's really interesting that I've been exploring recently is, as a UX person, somebody that supports teams that do user research, looking at ways to augment user researchers who are the folks who go out and talk to the people using systems to understand and make sure that those systems are actually working for those people. Looking for ways to augment that process and that research process through agentic experience. And one of the things that I've explored recently that's really interesting is one of my friends is working with a company that is taking large amounts of survey data to build synthetic personas, and then as they're building new capability, let's say a new website or a new functionality within an app, they're able to leverage autonomous AI agents to do initial testing. And let's say like they have survey data from a subset of users who are 70 plus. They use a website completely differently than somebody who's in their 20s. So being able to create a synthetic user to test, automated testing on a platform and provide feedback prior to actually doing real user testing is a way that we're seeing some augmentation in the user research space. I will caveat and emphasize it's not a replacement for real user research and user testing, but it's one of those elements of the human machine teaming that I spoke to earlier that I think shows some real promise.
I'll jump in next on a use case. So again, with my role, I'm very maritime operations center focused in my current job and supporting different planning activities in that space for the past few years. But I see it. What the examples I've seen are really, again, is this like force multiplier type capability. So instead of having a watchstander sit there with 20 chat windows open, are they being able to pull in some of this message traffic, parse it for information that can then give them insight into what's happening out there in the world? So that way I don't have to have somebody that might miss it or do all these other things. So that's the most common use case right now, is trying to extract extract data that's coming in through these command centers, and then using that to inform various decisions.
Yeah, we have a pilot right now with a customer. Everyone knows the numbers of CSOs and OTAs and pilots and everything that's going out right now with the shift in how we're approaching technology from a warfighter perspective. And the outcome of this pilot is to be able to get through from intaking all the information that's available right now, all these CSOs, all these OTAs, and then producing an outcome or an output of which are the pilots that are going to be successful, which ones are going to return the most ROI, which ones are what programs could we sunset that are out on the fleet today that these pilots could eventually replace as they get through the valley of death, as they get through their different accreditations. But to me, that's fascinating, right? We have so much data right now in the government. Being able to run that data, put agents behind it to make those decisions and provide an outcome that could potentially return, significant value to our warfighter is incredible.
Yeah, I love the acquisition point. One of the questions that came up when I was walking around was, how does agentic AI inform robotics? Some of the stuff that Boston Dynamics is doing, and others, to put robots on the battlefield to fight wars and be able to do productive things when it comes to shipbuilding and other things that are important to our fleets. Want everybody to, each of you, to comment on how does the learning of agentic AI play into the role of robotics being put into our military forces.
All right, I guess I'll start on that one. I guess, I view it as, I keep repeating the term force multiplier, right? So when you deploy these autonomous systems, right, to make that successful and be able to be controlled by an agent, you're going to need some level of autonomy, right? So it's slightly different than the agentic experience we're talking here, which is largely, when you say agentic, most people go to LLM-based agents that are running and doing things there. So our systems are going to have a level of autonomy that when I say go do this in an area, the agent can give that tasking much like a human would, and the machine will be able to understand how to do it on its own, versus having to be like controlled by an operator, right? So the key is we're going to have that level of autonomy built into our robotic systems to really be able to leverage the agentic aspects that are going along with that. But then as those those systems are out there and are, theoretically feeding data back, being able to process that faster to help inform the decision maker on how to pivot quickly, I think is where it'll become critical for a mission impact.
I think the authority for robotics or any of these autonomous systems must remain with the human. At the end of the day, we can design systems and models that generate or give us a path to these outcomes, but the ability for a human to step in at any point and be able to stop the robot or stop the agents, I think it's critical, and that's where the trust comes in. If it's designed with that in that intent, then I think it's extremely valuable to be able to have that out in the fleet with our warfighters.
Excellent. We'd love to take questions from the audience. I think questions are the best answers. We're obviously all looking for answers on this topic in our area of the world. So you can come up to the mic and ask a question. Don't be shy. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this important topic.
Not everyone at once.
Dave Heath, NC Tams PAC N5. Do you see any instances where you're looking at having AI do testing of software patches that are being rolled out so that we can get the security implementations that the vendors are pushing out to the field into the architecture faster? Right now we're looking, 6 months, 8 months, sometimes a year between the time a software revision is released to fix things to when it's actually implemented on our architecture to actually protect what it is that the vendor intended it to protect against. You see AI taking that train faster. Does anybody do anything about that?
Yeah, I would think it very much could help take the role in accelerating that, right? So especially if it's like software testing and we've got robust policies for how we want to test it through that, and they're nice and structured. This is how we're going to test it and do those sorts of things. I feel like that's an area where this agentic AI stuff can really flourish, is that the more structure you provide it, the easier for it is to follow that and be able to accelerate that. Now, the key is when there's findings, how do we quickly report that up? How do we explore some of the edge cases that might occur with that? But I think overall, it can act as a way to get it faster out to the fleet. And I'm a personal believer that software specifically shouldn't be as hard as it is to get out to the fleet. And how do we accelerate these patches and updates when you're not bringing in new hardware to get it out there so it can get in your hands faster?
I spoke a little bit about this in terms of like automated user testing. I'm obviously more from a front end perspective, user experience perspective, but I definitely see there's ways to stress test user experiences, user interfaces that sailors use ahead of deployment in the early stages of software development to make sure that what we're actually building is making somebody's life easier, better, accomplishing a specific objective. I think that that's definitely a promise that Agentic Experience and running automated testing with Agentic Experience holds.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think absolutely you should be doing that. I know we're doing it on the commercial side. I think it's going to be a shift in the way that we approach a lot of the red tape that we have in the government today. And in order to be able to expedite and accelerate that process, we're going to have to shift some policies, break some glass, do some things a little bit different. But I definitely see a future where that is something that's occurring in the defense sector.
Yeah, from a cybersecurity perspective, I think about the evolution from signature-based monitoring to user behavior analysis that took place and how rapidly that expedited our ability to identify a threat within a network and then take action on it. I think the same thing from a vulnerability assessment takes place, and hopefully being able to see those vulnerabilities sooner as you go from test to production will allow that 6 months to go to more of a 2-3 months. So we can get things out quicker to the fleet and make it operational. Great question.
Yeah, good afternoon. Dennis Mills with the Naval Education and Training Command. So I'm looking to the panel if there's any use cases or things where we're using agentic AI for training and education. As a sailor is on their career path, leveraging that to make a better trained sailor. Which equates to better readiness for the fleet. So, looking for any use cases or anything that you see out there that is within industry that could support the training and education domain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know all of the commands that we work with are looking at learning and development for the workforce today in all of these areas. There's a number of use cases that are out there currently on a list of funding requirements especially here with NavWar. I'm more than happy to have that conversation. If there's something out there or anyone out there that can support some of this workforce enablement, learning and development, I think there's a lot of opportunity right now, especially in the Navy, to accomplish that.
I think there's opportunity to personalized learning better with agentic experience and just artificial intelligence in general, in terms of being able to understand a particular sailor or command's strengths, weaknesses, in terms of whatever area they're operating in, whether it be undersea warfighting or tactical oceanography, whatever the topic is. But I think there's an opportunity to build a more intimate understanding of a sailor's knowledge gaps, strengths, and use agentic AI or, again, AI in general to build a learning program that caters specifically to those strengths and weaknesses, almost like a coach, a more personalized coach. Yeah.
Well, and to build off that idea, I heard a term recently that I liked where it's called just-in-time learning, and that as I'm going through these processes, right? So a lot of our sailors have a lot of different hats that they're wearing. They get trained on all sorts of processes and things that we're trying to do. How can that help pull the information and the process steps that I need for the step I'm doing right now? So that way I don't have to fully internalize the 300-page Navy planning process doctrine. I'm at this step, I can internalize the concepts and information that I need for what I'm doing right now. And then as I move through these different things, it'll help guide me and pull the information that's relevant as I'm going, right? So in terms of training, right, it would be how do I help get that, and then pull that together so that way as I'm moving through my career, it's pulling the stuff that's relevant for this step. Here's do's and don'ts for advancement. I'm interested in this. Here's the path you should take. So I think there's areas to pull that information together that right now would be really reliant on, do you have the right mentor? Have you talked to the right people to help your career grow? Now we can kind of pull more of that together to really explore those types of spaces.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of modeling and simulation and gamification around training, and this is no different in this topic. How do you enable people to retain knowledge and actually care about what they're learning? We saw this in the cybersecurity space long ago. It's very dry training, and it made a lot of people not care about actually protecting the commands that they were putting on their equipment. And if we can gamify it and meet them in the middle and allow them to feel relevant with what this is actually putting into their daily lives and in their work, I think that's going to be most effective from a training and awareness perspective when it comes to AI overall, and then agentic AI as it rolls out throughout these networks.
Hi, I have a question. I'm Maya Cook from Pacific Science and Engineering. So I'm from the human factors and human performance community, and those of you who work in that community are probably familiar with a lot of the work that's been done for many, many years on the human use of AI and all the findings that have come from that, a lot of design principles and things that we can apply going forward. So I was just curious from the panel, from your experiences, are there any real world examples of, I would say, human or technical constraints that you've come across that might not have been really obvious, but that could help this community kind of understand the kinds of things that they might face? Like Christian, you gave the example of AI, processing a lot of information and then overloading the user with a lot of content as kind of an unintended consequence. So can you comment on those human or technical constraints you think would be useful for this community? Thanks.
Thank you.
I got one to start. So looking at across a lot of our warfighting cells, right, to currently work with agentic type systems, a lot of it is I'm sitting at a computer typing into a terminal or a system. That's a lot of text-based prompting that I'm doing at the moment here. If you go observe any of our fleet in action, there's a lot of not everyone is in front of a terminal or a computer here. And so how do we capture the information, the discussions, everything that's going on beyond, do we have everyone wear a mic that's now being recorded and we feed that through later on? That's a big cultural shift and security shift of how do we get that. So that, a technical challenge is when we're not typing and prompting into the system, how is it gaining insight into the discussion and everything that's going on? And I'd have to come back and do that at a later point, which is, extra effort from the human side there. So I don't have the answer for how we solve that, but that would be a constraint of getting information into our systems here.
I think an interesting constraint to think about from the human perspective is under stress, how do humans deal with AI developed solutions or outputs? I think it's really easy now to take at face value what an AI generates and consider it truth or close enough, good enough. And that's me sitting at my desk under no stress. What happens when you put a warfighter in a stressful situation where they're using AI to make a decision? How willing are they to really dig down into what the AI is outputting to understand how the AI is thinking, how it's getting to its conclusion? Are the data sources it's referencing accurate? What's my confidence that this actual output is good enough to use to make a decision? I think that's definitely a constraint from the human side is, humans under stress. How do we build systems and think about a human analyzing that decision tree in those sorts of situations?
Could I give a direct example to that where I think that's really important? I was talking to a professor friend of mine, and he was giving his students a timed test. It was like a medical exam of some sort. So he embedded in the instructions for the test to replace the word gonorrhea with gonorrhea, right? So when you skim, it would look, you would look, oh, okay, it looks about the same. But so again, it's a medical test, so that's why I was there. But he could immediately use that to filter who was just copying and pasting from the AI systems, because the responses that they would get back would say gonorrhea instead of gonorrhea. So in a time-based situation, the students weren't really reading through, they were skimming. So in these types of situations for our warfighters, if things are happening, missiles are flying, getting shot at, whatever it is, high stress, are you really going to critically look at the input there or the output of that, or are you just going to take it at face value, and what are the impacts of that is going to be critical?
Yeah, I think it's, when you think about human performance, I think what comes to my mind is energy management. We saw this within the weapons manufacturing space when it came to supercomputing. It's a high pressure environment, and their energy was constantly being drained, and that allows lower performance. So I think when it comes to a topic like this, it's putting a thought process behind it that can help both the user and the creator kind of manage energy when it comes to leveraging these systems, because ultimately agentic AI is supposed to take some of that hard cognitive load off of the person using it. So I think we want to have that intention here.
Would like to comment briefly on Chris's comment, and thanks again for you all for being here. Very informative. My name is Willie Driscoll. I'm a former Top Gun instructor, flew 170 combat missions, shot down 5 airplanes in real air-to-air combat. A real air-to-air combat dogfight is incredibly intense. The tension, the anxiety, the fear is over the top. When you're doing it, you got the shakes going, your body's shaking, you're trying not to throw up. You usually don't, but the rule in our squadron was if you did, you cleaned up the cockpit when you came back. You try not to mess your pants, usually don't do that either, but also you clean up the cockpit when you come back. So my question is, and what we teach at Top Gun is every countermeasure has a countermeasure. So someone like me that's fixing to commit a weapon, and I'm under this incredible tension, anxiety, and stress and fear. My question is, how do I know the information I'm getting is real and there's a real enemy on the other end? Because I'm going to shoot the missile based on the information I have. I can't think up there. What we tell our pilots is it's reaction flying. You can't think. You can't handle displays because it's just too intense. So we want to make sure we shoot, but we don't shoot accidentally a friend. We call that a blue on blue. So what assurance can someone like me have based on what y'all are working on, that when I commit the weapon with today's technology, it's a real enemy on the other end?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the implication of that particular scenario is pretty intense, especially towards autonomous agentic systems where maybe they're making decisions on behalf of an operator. I don't necessarily know that agentic experience and that level of autonomy belongs in every aspect of the kill chain, especially what you're talking about. I think, your question was, how do you understand that the information you're receiving from let's say an agentic system is real? I think that ultimately the human needs to be the final decision maker of, are the inputs I'm getting from an autonomous system, an agentic system, are they valid? Looking at in a scenario that you're talking about where there's like no time to necessarily do that, I think it's really difficult, and that's something where maybe the technology isn't quite there yet to be able to implement it and integrate it into a kill chain scenario where decision making is that fast. But maybe there are other aspects of where a autonomous agent could provide environmental information to the operator during a dogfight where they can adjust their aircraft positioning better. Weather information is more accessible to give them a competitive edge. But I don't necessarily know that having agentic systems built into a scenario like that is in the best interest of the warfighter quite yet. I think that that's definitely something that we're all here talking about at West and thinking about what that future looks like. Thanks for your question.
But to add on, I think there's kind of two aspects of that where on one half you would have making sure the data pedigree. So like the agentic systems, they're going to be leveraging data in our systems and our architecture, right? So how do we make sure the pedigree of that track information is correct, right? So where did we acquire that from? Is it from a trusted source? Is it from a potentially compromised source? What is all of that pedigree? Can we trace that back? And then the better data we can feed the agent, the more trust you could have in there. The other side of that coin is understanding in what situations can these systems be compromised, right? So that example I gave of that professor's test, he used size 1 font that was white and just in there. So when they copy pasted the whole thing, it was there. That's, an easy prompt injection type manipulation. But what are the other more sophisticated ways that our systems could be compromised, where that trusted data source might be compromised? That track that I think is there, maybe it's being spoofed in some way, but hopefully as we get into this future of agentic AI, I could see that spoof that I Christian as a human might look at it and be like, oh, there's something there, let's get it. But the system that can work faster than me could correlate, oh, we're only tracking it this way. These other 3 things don't see it. So therefore, we actually have low confidence that this is what we think, what this one system is saying it is. So they might be able to accelerate some of that as we bring more information sources together. But it's understanding both that pedigree and the constraints, where like situations where it could fail.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up? How did you build trust in the avionics on the airplane? Like, how did you know that the altimeter was correct, or all the tools that were in the airplane? How did you, as a pilot, trust those things?
What we teach at Top Gun is being able to fly the airplane 1 inch from out of control at all times in a purposeful way. When you can demonstrate to us that you can do that over a period of time, then you know that you can put yourself into those positions and get through it. But we're hugely big on accountability. So we, in a very anal way, minutely debrief every fight. It's a definite winner and a definite loser. We always say, outplay the how and the why, downplay the who, but very accountability focused.
I actually think we will get to a scenario like that in the kill chain, and I do believe that a comment that you made at the end is is through the training, right? You have to be reliable. Your system has to be reliable. You have to have 99.9% accuracy in your testing heading into that scenario. And I do believe, right, if we get through something from pilot to production over in the warfighter, over on an aircraft, that by the time it gets there, that reliability should have been proven through significant amount of testing and through the proper data sources that are feeding it, so you can get to that trustworthy design. But I absolutely do believe that there will be a time where we get to that, that scenario that you described, if it's not already happening now.
Yeah, one of the big needs of the Navy is decision advantage. And I think one of the things, these systems are supposed to inform our training. And when shit hits the fan, per se, we go back to our training. And we can't get rid of that intuition feeling of going back to the training and seeing this as an anomaly. When you're shaking in the cockpit, you have that intuition. You've trained it over years. And I think it's being able to hone in on that and still give the trust back to the human to make the final decision. But it's a great point of how do you know what to trust when you're confused on what the information you're getting in? And that takes me back to my baseball days. Intuition was extremely important when the game was on the line. This is a much different, more serious situation. But I think when I see guys like you, guys and girls that get trained in these high stress environments, they're very intuitive people, and they know what right and wrong kind of looks like by asking the right questions. So I appreciate you giving your input here. So we have about 1 more minute if there are any questions. One more back here.
Hi, my name is Dennis from PMW 770. Just a comment. The Navy has a lot of stockpile systems, right? How do you guys see or recommend the implementation of this agentic AI in this software packages that are very proprietary?
That's tough.
So PMW 770, so submarines. The way that I envision agentic AI in a program office, in a PEO, or in a PAE, is through initially through deployment of, I would say, some of the more corporate office functions, right? A low risk, high reward type environment. If we can get these models in the acquisition process, in Navy ERP, in some of the less what is the word I'm looking for? In a place where if it makes a mistake, it's not going to create a significant issue. Then I think we can get those models in there, start trusting them in there, and then move them up to the top side, in a more classified environment. I think we can start earning that trust through the PEOs. It's very difficult because each PEO, each PMW operates differently, right? So, what you do in 770 is not going to work in 160, right? It's not going to work in 130 because everything's different. But I do believe the more trust we can gain from just having agentic AI in the PMWs as your daily use, as you're operating with them, then it's going to be much easier to move them more into the software packages that are being deployed into the actual programs that go out in the fleet, right? But I think we got to start somewhere. My opinion would be, let's start with low risk, high reward type use cases, and then move them into the more of the programs that are being deployed, on submarines, on aircrafts, on carriers, on things like that.
I'll add into your proprietary comment there, right? That's one of the big challenges, right?
Correct.
So for an agentic system to work, it will have to have like APIs to get information in and out, right? And so if I cannot access your black box, I need to at least be able to send stuff in and get something out. But then going back to the larger discussion here is in that what's coming out, I need some way to know a trust value of that answer, right? If I have no insight into what happens in your black box, we get back to this trust problem of, is it the right answer? Can I really verify that that target you want me to shoot is a bad guy? So we need some insight into that. But from the agent perspective, it's more, how can I pass information out in, get your answer out? And so I would say that's probably on the government to help decide and enforce that you have to be able to let systems talk to your program here, but understanding you might have your proprietary aspect that you need to protect. I think that still needs to be shaped of how do you do that so you don't expose all your goodness.
Yep.
But without that in and out, it's still going to be a stovepipe system, right? So we need a way to extract something out of there.
I think a good use case for someone like 770 or the POs would probably be around MBSE, digital engineering, right? Can you leverage AI and AI agents to accelerate the MBSE process, right? If you make an updating on a configuration document in one place, can you grab those agents to go and make all of those updates in all the different elements that go around the digital thread? So to me, something like that would be a valuable use case for the program offices, just knowing the amount of documentation that they have to maintain as it relates to their MBSE and digital engineering elements. And I know NAVWAR had I believe a strategy that was released a couple years ago around MBSE that came out of 5.0. I know that there were some discussions around leveraging AI and something like that. I think AI agents would probably actually be a great opportunity to leverage something in that space.
Very well. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, that will conclude the session. Oscar, Chris, Christian, appreciate your insights today. And thanks so much for showing up. We'll be around if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask us.